Like every day. That's crazy.
It's probably that's how every week would be like. It's like
I probably should put my face on that one.
it's like yeah.
Oh, yeah.
About
All right, gamers, it's 12:05, so I guess we'll get started now. So today's general meeting is intro to Wireshark. I'll be going over some announcements before we start. But yeah, if you haven't signed into the link tree, please link tr.ee/CalPolySwift, just so we can get logistics and stuff like that figured out. But yeah. So paid membership is still up if you want to. Oh, did you unmute yourself? Just unmute yourself. So dangerous. Okay, very cool. But yeah, if you haven't already become a paid member, the links are on Linktree as well. It is $20 for the semester and $35 for the year. But yeah, you get cool stuff. You get t-shirts, you get some limited quantity stickers that we're going to be ordering soon. You get webcams and other swag like that, especially the t-shirts. They go pretty hard, but yeah. So yeah, here we are at Intro to Wireshark. And we'll be ending it with the CTF on Friday. Yeah. So previously on Swift Academy, we did open source intelligence, where we basically gathered public information from people that post on the internet, right? And also tried to find as much information as possible where we could actually use it like as a threat. Then we did intro to net pen testing, where Dylan walked you through an actual internal pen test and how that works as well. But this workshop is mainly showing how these devices actually communicate with each other. So when like you laterally move throughout computers, how do those computers really communicate, and like getting into the very details of that. But yeah, and then next slide. I'll hand it to Bill and Elias, who will be presenting on this. I don't know, I'm holding this.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bill. I'm a CIS major. I'm a junior. I'm currently the Swinton lead.
What's up? I'm Elias. I'm a junior in computer science, and I'm a current Swinter.
I'm basically his supervisor.
He's my boss.
So here's some what we're going to go over today. First, we're going to go over our network basics, and we're going to talk about some packets. Shouldn't be too long. And Elias will go over Wireshark, and we'll wrap it up with everything we taught today. So network basics. Just a question for everyone. Who knows what a network is and is brave enough to answer?
I'm not ready.
So, oh, yes, in the back.
Okay, so in this case, a group of computers that can communicate.
Right. So if zoomed in here, he said it's a group of computers or devices that connect with each other. And well, it's important to know that beyond your home network, that there are other like bigger networks, like huge groups of networks that are interconnected with each other. And that interconnection creates what we know as the internet. So from my home network, or from my home, I could access a website all across from China or Japan, right? So we share data through these networks, which creates the internet. And speaking of home networks, to teach about or to know more about the networking devices, I brought what we have in our home. So we have the common home network. And for starters, we have our devices, which are also known as endpoints. These devices, they connect back and forth from our network. and create what we know as our home network. But if we want to connect from each device to another, we have to point a wire. We have to plug in a wire for each device, and that'll be we want like a central way to plug in the wires and have a centerpiece for traffic to connect with our other devices at home. This is where a switch comes into play. Kind of think of a switch as a center point of your home network, which traffic, use this camera here. So we have our laptop here, our PC or something like that. And let's say we want to talk to our printer right here. Through the switch, we can send traffic through the switch and kind of think of it as a train lever, which switches lanes and stuff. We have traffic that goes through the switch, and then it switches to, or it routes the network or traffic to the printer. Great. That's, we could talk to our devices at home, but now we want to, what about the other devices that don't have a way to plug in to the network? That's where our Wi-Fi access point comes in. It basically does whatever the switches does, and just without the wires and all that. And now we have a way to connect to our devices, and a way to connect to our devices with wire and wirelessly. But now we want to do the cool stuff, right? We want to access the internet. That's where the router comes into play. The router has two sets, or most commonly they have two networks. You have your home network. You also have the one outside, which is the public network, or your WAN. Now, the router acts as a bridge between your home network and the public network. But now, also able to connect outside of your house. This is where your modem comes into play. The modem, so if you didn't know that our network infrastructure outside your house, it actually relies on telephone networks, which still uses analog. But our home network actually uses digital. So the modem acts as a converter from digital to analog, in which once traffic enters the modem, we'll go outside, we'll convert it into analog and send it out through your internet service provider. Also note that all of these can be integrated into one machine or one device. Now, now we know all the devices in our household, but how can we identify them, right? Like imagine you're driving on the freeway, but the signs, they don't say anything. That's kind of like what we have right here. Ignore this. But how can network devices know where to go and like where to send stuff? This is where IP addresses come into play, or internet protocol. And in our home network, it will assign IP addresses to each device to know where traffic is coming from and where it needs to go. And the address, the usual or the most common one you see is IPv4 or IP version 4. And it's a 32-bit address, which ranges from, for each number, ranges from 0 to 255. And if someone spits out an IP address that's higher than 255, they are wrong. But besides, now you have the problem of how can isn't assigning addresses isn't like hard, but we have a protocol that's called DHCP, or Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, which the router is able to assign IP addresses to each device. So I can have a small animation here. So a device starts off with, doesn't have an IP address, right? It'll request an IP address to the router. And then the router has a list of available IP addresses. And it basically just picks whatever IPs it wants to pick. So let's say it goes with 192.168.1.2. And then it will lease that address to the device, and now, voila, has an IP address. I'm going back to that freeway or that traffic analogy. We have the freeway itself, or you could think of it as the network. And then those devices are connected via roads or other roads that go into the freeway. And then we have addresses that tell us where traffic needs to go. Now we have protocols, or you could think of it as a way of traveling through the network. Now think of, we have trucks and other cars, right? The trucks are meant to just go from one place to another, or it's basically their job to get to a destination. But for other cars, they can go from, yeah, they do have a destination, but they take like different routes to get there. This is where the analogy kind of ties in with these protocols. So TCP, kind of think of it as a trucking service where it needs to get from one point to another with no stops, just doing its job. But since they're trucks, they're really slow, and I guess they're really slow, that's all. But it's their job to send content from one place to another. So in TCP, we have data that's being sent from a receiver and a sender. But for UDP, we have going back to the analogy, we have just regular cars. They're small, fast, but sometimes they do crash. I'm not saying that trucks don't crash, but most normal cars do crash. And unlike trucks, they take different routes to get to one destination. It's not their it's not their job to get to that destination. So in UDP, it takes any route just to get to that destination. Yeah. And now we have parts. Now I think of it, so going back to that whole freeway analogy thing, we have our IP destination, but traffic needs to know where to, in this context, they need to know where to park. So in networking, ports are meant for designated spots in a network for traffic to be sent to a certain service. So example of this would be your web browser. If I'm sending a HTTP request to a server, it needs to know which part it needs to go, so then that server can handle the request. So most commonly, HTTP is on port 80, and well, it will process data that will head to port 80, will process everything, or the web server will process everything. And even though there's this many 535,000 ports, port numbers are, for the most part, they're mostly standardized. So, port 80, all computers should understand what port 80 is, and 22, and they should be able to, they know what the port is for, so then they can communicate with each other. So just bring everything together. We have a topology of like, I guess, the internet, and also your home Wi-Fi. But a topology is basically a diagram of networks. So we have your home network and your internet. So I think we want to go to google.com. So that traffic gets sent to your router, which through magic somehow it gets bridged to your public network, and once it exits out of once it gets converted into or goes through the modem, that URL gets sent to a DNS server, or a domain name service, which kind of think of it as a phone book. I don't know if anyone knows what a phone book is, so, but it will match whatever the URL is, and it will spit out a IP for your router to use. Once it gives the router the IP address, it'll send it to basically what I talked about in the beginning of the slides. It goes through several sets of networks to route it once, or routes it through several networks, and then it's sent to Google's web server. And that traffic gets processed into whatever the web server does, and then it sends it back from where it came from, and then into our router. And boom, you have google.com. And traffic doesn't, I think of, there needs to be a way for traffic to be sent throughout networks. And this is where packets come in. So what are packets? Packets are just formatted data that have a header and a payload, or your data. I don't think of it as package. So the header is basically the label, the shipping label, and your payload is whatever's inside the box. But packets aren't sent as one giant segment. Like, imagine sending 1 gig of data to the network. That would take forever. So we chop up, so that data gets chopped up into packets, and it's sent through the network into the network in multiple packets. And these packets kind of look like this. where you have the header. Should we indicate the page? You have the header right here, which kind of like what a shipping label is. I don't know what most of these are, but you look for the address where it came from, where's it shipping to, what kind of phone call used, and what version of IP it is. And then you have the payload, which is just whatever you're sending to whose network. And you'll see once you're in Wireshark, you'll see these layers in Wireshark.
Speaking of Wireshark, that's what we'll be talking about next. If heads up, if you guys want to download Wireshark to follow along, that'd be cool. I promise Wireshark is not malware. You just go on the website, click a bunch of buttons if you want to follow along. Anyways, so what I'll be going over is PCAP files, loading and capturing files on Wireshark, the UI layout of the actual application, dissecting the packets, which Bill just touched on a little bit earlier, and the layers and how they correspond to OSI models. And then I'm gonna go over filtering through the packets once you have them in Wireshark. Oh, did this just die? Maybe. Oh, the YouTube word. Yo. Yo. Internal. Yeah. That's crazy. Only was charging. That's wild.
It sucks.
The Zoom does not get to hear any information.
Oh, it's like very low battery.
Gotcha.
Oh. Okay, you can just stand here.
All right. What if I move this? No, you can't move it.
Wait, no, you can use the, wait, it's just lightning, so unplug it and then like plug the white cable, like from the bottom.
What if you just
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. We're so back. Anyways, the UI layout, as I was saying. Up top, we have the toolbar with your pretty standard file edit view. They do pretty much what you'd expect. Then next we have the display filter. This is where you would type in, input your filters, which I'll go over a little later. Then in purple here, we have loading recent files. If you don't have any recent files, you can go up in the top left file and then load one in. And then we have the capture filter and available sniffing interfaces. Basically what this does is you can set certain filters if you don't want to capture certain traffic. And the available sniffing interfaces would just be like through Ethernet or Wi-Fi. You're just specifying where you want to capture, essentially. And then at the bottom, we have the status bar. If you're ready to load or capture, how many packets you have, and then just all your information there. All right, now we have the layout. Before I continue, I'm gonna briefly explain what a PCAP file is, because that's what we're gonna be working with. Essentially, when Wireshark captures packet data, it formats it into a binary type file, and then it displays it in the UI. As you see here on the bottom right, we have packet bytes. This is what the actual file looks like. It's just in hexadecimal format. So at the very top, we have the file name. So you know what you're working with. Oh yeah. File name up here. Very handy. And then in the middle here, the bulk of the UI is filled with all the actual packets. This is what you're going to be working with in order to sort through your information and actually see what's going on. Here on the left is the packet details. Once you click on a packet, so you can see the first one's clicked, this is essentially the summary of all the information, neatly sorted and human readable. On the right, as I mentioned before, this is just the packet bytes. It's the same information as the packet details, except just the raw hexadecimal, essentially. And then at the bottom, again, we have file name, total number of packets, and packets displayed at the bottom here. All right. So what I want to go over next is packet dissection. Essentially, that left panel. It might look a little scary, so I'm gonna break all that down very slowly for you guys. The first section here, the top square, this handy arrow pointing, we have the physical layer. Basically, this summarizes properties such as size of the packet in bytes and the time of capture. It's the physical things like the tangible elements of the packet. No, not the data or anything. Then the next one we have below is the IP layer. This layer mainly focuses on the IP address of the destination and the source of the packets. All right, to break it down further, here's the physical layer zoomed in so you guys can read what it says. Basically, at the top, we have the frame number. That's at what this is just the packet number. In Wireshark, all the packets are just numbered in order. They just call them frames here. So that's just what that is. And then the next section, we have arrival time since last capture. If you filter through this at the top, we have the exact date in which it was captured. And then the time since previous capture. This is the first one, so there's no previous frame, but if there was, it would show you there. And then the last part that you should focus on is the frame length in bytes. The difference between frame length and capture length is Wireshark doesn't always capture the whole packet. So if it didn't, it would just show you the discrepancy there. And the capture length would just be a little shorter. All right. Next, we have the IP layer zoomed in similarly. The main takeaway of this layer is basically just the source address. It shows you the IP of where it's coming from, and then the destination where it's going. It's helpful for determining, back and forth conversations. You can monitor the source and destination of the different packets. At the top, it summarizes it for you nicely in case you're too lazy to click down. All right, coming back to packet dissection, we have the next two sections. To briefly summarize, we have the protocol layer. It details the protocol used to actually transport the packet, and the application protocol layer, which is the specific application information, and this can vary depending on the type of packet you're working with. Yeah. All right. So again, this is just the protocol layer zoomed in. The main takeaways here is basically we have TCP mentioned before, as Bill explained. This is the slower protocol version, but more stable in terms of transporting data. So that'll be listed up at the top. And then we have the source port and destination port. And these again correspond with the source and destination IP from the previous layer. And these are all summarized at the top too. Again, if you're too lazy to click down, very handy. All right, moving on. Man, it does not like me today. Moving on, we have the application protocol layer. These are very vastly because they're very dependent on the type of packet you're working with. This one is an example of FTP, but they can differ: HTTP, SSH, etc. They all look different, so you have to be aware of that when you're looking through packet data. But here we have the actual, it's like the top layer information. You have the URL. This is what like users would actually be working with. So it's the top layer as opposed to like the first layer I talked about, which is just the length of bytes. We've moved all the way through. All right. Next, I wanted to talk about following streams. When you follow a TCP stream, it's technically a filter. I'll explain what this means in a second. But in order to do this, you would, right click on a packet, go down, hit follow, and then there it is, TCP stream. There you got it. When you click that button, I just told you to click for no reason, it follows the stream and you'll get this window that pops up. This helps me explain what a TCP stream is, actually. It's basically a summary of a conversation between two devices when they connect through TCP. So it's a back and forth conversation. To explain this a little further, we have the text in red and then the text in blue. The text in red would be like the machine. Like this is a user talking to a machine, basically. And so it sends this message, the user types in their username, and it's like password required. Then you type in the password. It's like back and forth, signified by the red and blue. And so when you follow a stream, it just helps so you don't have to sort through all the packets manually. It just gives you like the cliff notes of a conversation between two devices when they connect. All right. Next is actually filtering packets. If you don't want to follow a stream, if you're trying to filter for something more specific, maybe. I just have one example of a filter here. There are many, many filters. FTP request command equals pass. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm searching for FTP requests and that are a password request. And so what that does when I enter that is, see at the top, there's only 3 packets. It just, filters them out. It only gives me the requests that request for a password. Filters can be, there's like a wide range of them. They can be strings, they can be regular expressions. If you want a more complex filter, filter out multiple things at once, it's a very helpful tool if you're trying to analyze what's going on in the overall PCAP file. All right, wrap up. Networking in a nutshell. What is networking, guys? It's a set of computers sharing resources, communicating at the very end of the day. It's important networking devices to keep in mind too when you're visualizing that model. We have the switches, routers, and endpoints devices all working together to communicate. All right. And to summarize again, how they communicate, they need addresses to identify endpoints. The IP addresses are essential for this, so packets know where they're going, where they're headed. And then ports used by the application in order to actually send those packets the specific parking spots they need to go. And of course, protocols, TCP and UDP. You want to make sure you know the difference. Not like you don't need to know it super well, but like the general idea. TCP is more reliable and slow, while UDP can be more prone to just fast and inefficient transfers. And of course, packets as a unit of traffic. They're very helpful to know that when you're to know what you're looking at when you use Wireshark. And here is a sneak peek at Friday's workshop. If you want to look at the CTF, just follow the link there.
Yes, and I can probably take over here just to show you the CTF platform. We are doing another CTF. If you were here for the OSINT one, it's basically a continuation of that. Just because I thought it'd be funny. I don't have it. Oh, wait, I got it. I know computers. So if you go to ctf.calpolyswift.org, the slides are on Linktree too, by the way, if you didn't get the key there. So when you register, it should be asking you for a registration code. So that registration code was the one on the slide, which was 8523. But yeah, there shouldn't, like, earlier I was looking at it and I see like people like already signed up. I'm like, how did they already sign up? Like I didn't even give out the code yet. But yeah, that's the code. If I register here, I'm just gonna use my admin account. So as you see, here's all the challenges. First, you'd want to go to the README first. It will show you like the context. Yeah, I wrote too much, but basically gives you the scenario and tells you how to submit the flag. So for this one, you would just submit OW Dylan Tran, and from that point on, any answer will be OW with the brackets and then the answer, right? This is the order I want you to go through. I honestly don't care if you use it or not. If you're a complete beginner, I recommend going to FTP first. It's easier to look at the conversations, right? Because the whole point of this workshop is you're given a bunch of data and you have to create a narrative based on that. And these CTF questions are there to help you help guide you through building that story and understanding what's actually going on in the network, right? So this is the real like the chain that I would want you guys to go to. The first four are mainly like beginner introductory stuff. So if you haven't touched Wireshark before, this should be fine for you. And you'll be able to play with like filters and stuff with the PCAP files. SMTP, you'll actually be handling like real malware. So please don't download malware on your computer. Try to download a VM as soon as possible. If you can, the first four, you don't need a VM, but once you get to SMTP, I recommend you actually download a VM and actually inspect there, because what I basically give you is a bunch of emails and you have to go and like basically triage it, compare that traffic with the PCAP file and determine which email was the one that actually downloaded the malware, right? So that's most of it. You'll get the, okay, yeah, people are already solving. You'll get the PCAP files at the beginning. So this is the download file. Don't worry, it's not malware. You would get these at the beginning of each challenge. And as you can see, I have FTP0, and then there's like 16 of them. All of them would be using the same PCAP file, right? So each of these will require different filters and stuff for you to go out and find. And we have some pretty funny stuff in here. SMTP is probably my favorite, just because I took it from somewhere else. So as you can see, I put a very big warning here to please put this on a VM. The malware only affects Windows 7, but I don't know if you're on Windows 7. But yeah, if you want to look at more PCAP files, go to malwaretrafficanalysis.net. That's a really good way to start building your understanding of it. But these are very basic. This is basically something you'd see in NCL if you're comfortable with that already. We just put funny story in it and chat at the chart. But yeah, it should be a good time. Any questions on that so far on how to access this? Yes.
Oh, so for like the last part where you said there was like a malware, what like I guess OS you can use for like the VM?
If you can get a Kali Linux VM that comes with Wireshark already installed, and you'll probably be using it like a lot anyways. So having it already will be beneficial. But yeah, any other questions? If you want a Windows 7 VM, be my guest. But yes.
You can use Camino to deploy your own
Oh.
Linux VM. And a guide on how to use Camino is available in the Discord. If you look at the forum for the internal NetBand week where infrastructure was provisioned for Camino.
Yeah, so if you're on an iPad and you can't really put Kali on an iPad, you can go to our guides on Camino and you can spin it up. I think you can still do it for the iPad, right? You just see a Python VPN. Yeah, so you can
do it on an iPad.
Cause it's funny. Like you could be typing up like commands on the type screen. Yeah, so if you're low on resources, just go to the Camino guide Dylan mentioned. I'll also put it on the announcement as well. There's one more thing. Oh, well, if top 10 for this one, the same as the OSINT lab, you'll get limited edition stickers of orbital weapons this time around. So it won't be terrestrial weapons, it'll be the orbital weapons logo. The really cool skull sticker you'll see on the front of this page. But yeah, there will be more challenges because last time I did the OSINT lab, people finished it like in 3 days. So I'm trying to spread out the challenges so you actually have something to do on the Friday workshop. Also, Friday workshop is 4 to 6. FAST is actually doing a malware analysis workshop, which actually goes pretty hand in hand with this. So if you're interested in that as well, you can sit in for 4 hours on Friday. And we'll have pizza too. So
Marathon.
but yeah, any questions before we end it here? Anyone need help with this getting into the CTF? No? Okay. Well, thank you. Can I get one last round of applause for Bill and Elias? Feel free to reach out to either of them. I'm not sure how responsive I'll be the next week. If you have any questions about Wireshark or filters to use on any of the challenges, I'll probably put hints. That sounds like a lie, but yeah.
You're just gonna make them harder.
Yeah, thank you again. Hope to see you Friday. Have a good rest of your day. Good job, good job.
Keep for coming and don't forget to sign in.
Oh yeah, don't forget to sign in.
Nice.
Do your midterm. It was very good.
It's a midterm too.
Do your midterm. Do your midterm.
Someone has midterms.
Bill, go.
What's the registration code?
It's in the Zoom. Actually, I'll drop it on you.
Oh, okay, I think I don't know. It's like.
Yeah, they're gonna be.
It is. Oh, no, the train missed. Emerson.
85230.
Yeah, that's what you. Yeah, and then.
That was so awesome.